Welcome to the Sports Betting Integrity panel. I think we've actually lost Adrian Ford. I don't think he's with us. Is that right? We do have. So I'm David Nelson. I'm the director of AS USA. So AS is Spain's leading sports newspaper. We are proud media partners of SIGA and stand with them in their fight for integrity and to stamp out corruption. Because we've already had the people on the panel introduced, I think we'll just get stuck right in. As I'm a journalist, I've got some breaking news. 3 people have actually just been arrested in Ireland for match fixing, on suspicion of match fixing. And obviously, it's the Garda. The police have arrested them. It sounds like it's a European-wide operation. They were allegedly involved in match fixing games in the Irish League. So the Irish FA have made a statement, and I think what it shows is that the sports betting environment has got so many stakeholders who are all intertwined. And one of the things that I think everyone would agree is that if all the stakeholders could work together better, collaborate, share information, things would work better, and we could move towards a more prosperous future with more integrity. And so that's where I'd like you guys to kind of analyze where we are now in this, how much people are cooperating, because it's very complicated, so many different stakeholders, and what are the next steps, where could we go? And I think I'd like, Ricardo, could you start with this one as the president of the Portuguese Online Gambling Association?
Absolutely. I think it's important at the outset to explain that under the Portuguese framework, there's only bets between the operator and the consumer. There's not a peer-to-peer model, which means that any foul play affects directly the operators. So this is a critical topic for us. We're completely aligned with SIGA when they say that, I even wrote it down to make sure I wouldn't misinterpret it, that their vision is that sports is played to the highest integrity and free from any form of unethical and illicit and criminal activity. We're completely aligned because it's absolutely important that the sports betting sector is supported exactly by the same principles. So going forth a bit into this frame of thought, I'd say that heavily regulated markets like the Portuguese market are already in a very good position to fight corruption, fight criminals. KYC requirements are quite extensive. All the transactional activity is reported to the regulators. So there's a very fine comb already on these markets. What is the important message that we need to convey is that more of the betting volume needs to be brought to the regulated market. There's still quite an illicit market active in Portugal, and we need to bring it to under the eyes of the regulator, making sure that the people who are playing are exactly who they say they are. I guess this is the main message that we'd like to convey at this point.
Okay, that's very interesting. Just to follow up on that, what concrete steps would you take to do that? Is there a plan? Like, how do you make that happen?
Well, illegal gambling, the illegal activity is quite an extensive topic. It has been tackled by the Portuguese regulator. The law already has a few mechanisms to try to stop that. But I think to really take a few steps forward, if I had to name them, I'd start by saying that the offer needs to be as inclusive as possible. Because whenever the offer is not as exclusive as possible, people tend to flock to the legal offer. So that's the first one that is quite important. I'd say then also, generally, all of the stakeholders, like you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of stakeholders in the sector. They're not working together, which means that, for example, on the payment system side, we have third parties processing payments for the legal market and for the illicit market. We have odds feeds provider working with the legal market and also with the illegal market. And this applies to platform providers and to a plethora of other providers that if they were eventually forced to work within only the regulated framework, I'd say that illicit market would dry up fast.
Thank you very much for that. Zafi, your company analyzes millions of data points to identify match fixing, and you're working with SIGA. Who else do you work with in this cooperation, and where do you see this going, this idea?
Thanks. Yes, we work primarily with sports governing bodies, and also we give information to law enforcement agencies, anyone who investigates match fixing, essentially. We are very much a sort of expert witness provision service in that respect. And so therefore, if anyone that can make a difference tangibly when it comes to match fixing, whether it's through disciplinary or criminal processes, then that's who we share information with. Essentially providing a platform for further investigative work. I don't think the monitoring of betting markets or performance analysis, because that's the other side of the coin, of course, it's performance analysis as well, in themselves are sufficient to meet most kind of evidential standards of proof. But what we want to see, particularly at a criminal level, is that information being used as a platform so that indicators come out from that type of analysis and then give investigators directions in which to look. So, for example, when it comes to players or individuals suspected of match fixing, to be able to go, okay, now we know we can use traditional law enforcement methods to look for more concrete evidence, such as whether it's through phone records or bank accounts, etc. I think one of the things that really needs to improve in this area is going after the match fixers themselves rather than just the players. And to go back to your story about Ireland this morning, that's good to see. It's good to see that law enforcement agencies are taking it seriously. I know it's difficult. There's priorities being set, of course, and many law enforcement agencies are suffering from lack of resources, etc. And are told to go in a particular direction. And how does match fixing compare to, say, counter-terrorism work or other serious organised crime? But often it is organised crime that's match fixing. And organised criminals involved in match fixing are quite likely to be involved in other lines of work as well. So I think coming together, as you were saying, and working together closely is very important when it comes to all of this in order to make that tangible impact.
Right, thank you very much for that. Matt, I'd like to turn to you. The product you've got, Gamban, it's software you install on a computer to stop people who have a problem with gambling then going back and being able to use gambling websites. So you're sort of representing the people with gambling problems in this debate. And I'd love to get your take on this, how the regulatory framework and how the betting companies see it and your view.
Yeah, sure, thanks. So yeah, our software blocks access to gambling sites and apps on devices designed to be as difficult to remove as possible, blocks the regulated and unregulated markets. I think our interest in this is, the reason we're members of SIGA as well is because we see that we may have a role in reducing the propensity for match fixing among, for example, if you identify like where the vulnerabilities lie in how matches are fixed, it tends to be, well, if you're addicted to gambling, then you're an athlete, you're more likely to be vulnerable to that, to taking bribes. So that's a big problem, particularly in the US now with the legalization of sports betting and college athletes and betting markets on college matches where athletes aren't paid. So there's obviously a huge vulnerability there too. So I think on that side of it, on the athlete vulnerability side, we feel like we have a role. If people are aware of what we do and our software and how it can restrict access to gambling among the vulnerable population and demographic, we think that can help. But also we think quite clearly there's a symbiotic relationship between the betting operators and sport generally. I think there's obviously a huge amount of revenue that goes from betting operators into sport, whether it's via marketing or sports betting rights. And really, I think that there is a role for perhaps looking into what markets are offered and seeing whether there are particular vulnerabilities in those markets. So an example that's often cited is, if you're allowing people to bet on the time of the first throw-in, does that make it more likely that that match can be more easily fixed? You just have to bribe the guy that takes the kick off and then they can kick it straight out, right? So I think that and then that's just a kind of a stepping stone. That's what opens up the wider kind of vulnerability. Once you've bribed that guy, then it just basically opens up those opportunities for fixing matches. And therefore, it's in the interest of betting operators to ensure that there is integrity in sports. Otherwise, people aren't going to bet on the sport if they think it's fixed. And there's obviously an interest among the sports governing bodies who are selling the rights to watch these matches and obviously want to uphold the integrity of the sport to ensuring that they aren't fixed. So can the sports governing bodies and the betting operators work more closely together, I think, to ensure that there aren't markets that are more vulnerable to match fixing? And I think they can. And in the UK, for example, the Premier League has been lobbying for a sports betting right. At the moment, there isn't any obligation on betting operators to pay a license fee in order to offer bets on a particular sport. And the Premier League's very keen on that. So we're trying to kind of see how that might manifest out of the gambling review, out of the fan-led review of football as well. But all of these things really do intersect, I think, around gambling-related harm and having some kind of oversight of what types of bets are offered and what resources are available to people that experience harm.
Okay. Very, very briefly, could you just tell, how easy has it been for you to speak to the other stakeholders in the industry? In terms of sports, obviously SIGA has been very helpful with facilitating that, and we've obviously spoken a lot to the Premier League, to certain gambling operators, but I think that what the sports governing bodies are really crying out for, particularly in the UK, is that degree of power and ability to control what types of bets are offered. And I think that if they had that ability to kind of at least have that conversation with a bit more leverage with the betting operators, then it would actually be better for the regulated betting market anyway, because it would help to uphold integrity, which ultimately ensures the sustainability of that particular product. Right, thank you very much for that. I think we've got Ricardo Bianco on. Yep.
Hi, Diogo. How are you doing?
Hello, how are you? Where are you today?
Good. I'm in São Paulo, Brazil.
Oh, very nice, very nice.
Really.
So, given everything we've just heard now, it would be great. So you are the CMO of Galera Bet, who are also a SIGA partner, complete disclosure here. It would be great to get your view as a betting operator? And particularly, I was really keen to get it as you're mostly based in Brazil, I believe. I don't know what percentage share of the market you have in Brazil as opposed to elsewhere. If you could let us know what's the situation there and what steps forward do you think need to be taken?
Okay. Oh, can I see? I'm seeing myself both sides anyway. Can you hear me well?
Beautiful.
Okay, perfect. So, first of all, Brazil is a country that will become regulated soon, we believe. So we create a brand. We are part of a JV between us and Playtech. Playtech is one of the biggest players in gambling marketing in the world. So what we have now is like a walk awkward situation, because without regulation, we do not have rules. But it doesn't matter to us because we are applying the highest standards in compliance, AML policies, responsible gaming, and of course, integrity. Of course, integrity of the game, match fixing is a big liability to the business. So we have to take care and look very close to it. But we have to have and look for standards outside of Brazil to try to bring the best practices to us. We are very happy because in Brazil we have the Brazilian Confederation and the Federação Paulista de Futebol, the Paulista Federation, Football Federation, that they are very keen as well regarding integrity. Of course, just the game, but it helps a lot. For us, the best way now to do is, of course, apply these right standards and focus on education and prevention. So by doing this, we can, start to create this culture of a legal and sustainable environment for betting operators to be in Brazil. We know that it's not a job for just one brand to do. We have to involve everybody. Everybody that just talk about collaboration. We believe a lot on this. We believe that we have to have a lot of, all the stakeholders working together, the government as well. We have to have this vision, and doing so, we believe that this sustainable environment could be much better for everybody. So, if you're planning long term, it makes total sense move on this direction.
Okay, and do you, as a sports betting company, how much contact do you have with legislators and regulators? Is it absolutely day to day? Do you have, monthly summits, weekly summits? Particularly if you're talking about there's regulation coming down the pipeline, how much input are you having into that?
Okay, we ourselves directly, we do not have. We have a team of government relationship that take care of it. They are in close contact with people in Brasilia, talking, hearing, listening what they have to say. So until we do not have the actual regulation, it's like we say, like a gray area. But we do our HealthGov job, and for it is very, very important. Everything looking on the compliance side, you cannot go beyond. By the time if you do not have someone to talk, in that specific matter, it's very hard. So we are talking to some people that we know that are looking to the regulation, but it's a very difficult task today, this HealthGov job that people are doing, and it's very, how can I say, it's amazing the way they work. It's to try to bring the light all these matters that we believe is important, all this liability, simple as that.
Because I wanted the other Ricardo to come in. You presumably know what's going on in Brazil. How much contact do you have? Is there, transatlantic contact between you guys and them? Is there?
Not at the moment. No, we do have some operators that are planning or already have operations in Brazil, but we have not established institutional contact. We've been focused mostly on Europe. There's a lot of work to do across Europe. I think the problems are very similar. The solutions are also very similar. When you go transatlantic, the problems change a little bit. So we haven't established that bridge. We'll probably tackle that in the near future.
Yeah, it sounds like just there's so many different markets, so many different regulations. I mean, that's something that the possibility of it ever having a global standard, would that be 150 years away?
I'm not sure how many years away we are from that, but I mean, there's a lot of differences just within Europe. There's huge differences in regulatory requirements, and I think we need to begin on agreeing on very simple steps that can be taken to start solving the problem. One critical one that I already mentioned, and I can actually share some data with you to kind of reinforce the point. It is critical that in fighting match fixing, that the regulated operators are given the tools to absorb demand, and this means being able to offer the markets that are needed. I heard the previous argument, but I mean, this needs to be coordinated, obviously, with the legal operators. But if we limit only the markets on the regulated side, demand goes after the illegal market. Just to put it into a little bit of perspective, some of our members are part of the International Betting Integrity Association, formerly known as ESA. It was a trade body that sports betting companies created many years back to try to tackle this topic, to share information about unusual betting patterns. And according to them, between 2017 and 2021, there have been 12 cases that affected the Portuguese market. 12, which is not a lot. Ideally, it would be 0, but 12 considering is not a lot. But what is really important here to understand is that 100% of these cases involved betting outside of the market where the event was taking place, meaning that the betting was occurring, the irregular betting patterns were happening outside of Portugal. In 2 specific cases, which represent about 17% of this whole lot, we had a couple of clients situated in the Portuguese market, and all of them had Asian names. So, I mean, it's really important to understand that this is an international phenomenon. Organized crime is behind this, and it needs to be tackled as a global initiative. But step by step, one of the most important steps is regulated markets where we already have very strict KYC measures. We keep a very close eye on the betting patterns. Operators in Portugal have the obligation not to let people who are participating in the events or are associated with the competitions, they cannot register on the platform. So we already have that obligation. So if we're given more markets, if we can absorb more of the market, I think match fixing is going to be reducing, because we can identify the people who are behind this quite easily.
Okay, Zafi, could you speak to that? I mean, how is it? Do you think it's going to be possible just by analyzing the data? Is that the route? And is it artificial intelligence? That was the other kind I wanted to throw in quite quickly, because the last one ran on. We've not got much time.
I always call it 2 crime scenes. One is the betting markets. Say if it's betting related match fixing, that's where that's where you see the activity. That's where the financial activity takes place. And of course, the other crime scene is the pitch itself, because you need participants involved in the sporting event to facilitate that manipulation. On the subjects of the betting markets, you have to look at what match fixers do and how they go about their business. So if you're pretty certain that you know what the outcome of a match is going to be, because you have influenced that and you've got that knowledge, then you want to maximize your financial returns on that. And that doesn't mean that you're going to bet the smallest kind of liquid markets that you can find. You'll go for the biggest. So you go to Asia. And Asia is where you'll find the exploitation of betting markets on a huge scale. And of course, the Asian betting system is completely different to the European or the westernized system. So it's, I think we just have to remember that this is where the money kind of tends to go on the match fixing side, certainly at an organised level. I'm not talking here about an athlete's friend or member of their family or a player's friend who gets some information about when the first throw-on's going to be and decides to make a few pounds or euros or dollars on that, because that kind of bet isn't going to make you retire financially comfortable for the rest of your life. So yeah, I think we should bear that in mind. I just want to very quickly circle back to one thing you said as well, talking about it on the sports side. You're completely right that it's in the sports interests for the game to be played with integrity. But it comes back to the old saying of perception being everything. And it's unfortunately sometimes seen as more important that the sport is perceived to be playing with integrity, which is why you will not always see allegations of match fixing sufficiently investigated, because it compromises the commercial success of that competition that the people who are investigating are also depending upon the success of. So there's a conflict. There's a conflict there. So.
Have you got anything to say on that point?
Just very quickly, I do agree that the enforcement against illegal gambling sites, the unregulated market, just isn't good enough at the moment. And there was a very good session before ours on tackling piracy and ensuring that broadcasting rights are upheld. And that needs to really be applied to gambling. That is a priority, because gambling, unregulated gambling, is fueling match fixing, or it risks fueling match fixing if it isn't already. The other interesting thing, I think, is that while it might be the impact of restricting the markets, the regulated markets, in conjunction with where the sports governing bodies see the risk as being, while that might impact leakage to the unregulated market in theory, it is the Asian betting markets that are experiencing all the downside, whereas I think the domestic regulated markets where the sport's taking place are experiencing the upside of liberalised betting markets. So I think that there has to be international cooperation, and I think what you talked about before about a global standard, I think there has to be a degree of reciprocity, but all of this has to be done in collaboration. And I think that the betting operators have an incredibly important role to play, and obviously, they have to be mindful of how it might fuel unregulated gambling, and then obviously have that drawback of actually fueling match fixing as a result. But I think that there is definitely a balance to be struck where the most high-risk betting markets are restricted, and that can have an impact too, as long as illegal gambling is tackled in the same way piracy is tackled.
Right. One last question. One last word from Ricardo. Ricardo. Other Ricardo.
Yes.
Hello. We can't see you yet.
Okay.
Hello. I was just wondering if you had a closing remark. I was wondering what do you see as the biggest opportunity and threat? I know it's quite a big, wide open one, but.
Okay. Opportunity. we can see because Brazil is in the way to regulation, create new standard from ground zero. It's a beautiful opportunity. Create a new culture. I think that's the opportunity. And the threat, Brazil have a lot of leagues, a lot of subcategories on football, and it's very hard to control all of them. So if you take a look on this part of liability of the business for operators, I believe that this control is the biggest liability, the lack of control today. Even if the Confederação Brasileira, they're looking close to everything, Federação Paulista as well is doing a wonderful job. We do not have the actual government look into it until we have a regulated market. But in soccer, on the low divisions, I believe that we have the biggest threat in the market. So that's why, again, education and prevention for us, it's key to everything. Of course, use technology as a playtech JV. For us, technology is a key, but we cannot oversee or not forget about manpower and the intelligent people that work with us. Together with technology, I think we can start to build a better future for Brazil. And just one thing that I noticed that you asked, but I didn't answer on the first question. Galera Bet is a brand created just to operate in Brazil. So all our efforts are for Brazil. So simple as that.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you very much to everyone on the panel.